They kept the money and then didn't, even with taxpayer money, pay back the people they'd robbed.
Exactly. Now, you talked about Bear Stearns. Bear Stearns was also fed into J.P. Morgan. I think Bear Stearns really was bankrupt several times over with derivatives. Same story for Lehman Brothers, which was then allowed to go bankrupt completely. But Washington Mutual is a really egregious case because it's not clear that they were bankrupt at all. They were probably viable, and they were fed into J.P. Morgan to give J.P. Morgan all of those deposits that they could use to offset some of their toxic derivatives in the long run. Now, the other big thing that Sheila Baird does do or doesn't do at the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation is the following. According to the banking laws of the United States, the big banks in Wall Street are bankrupt several times over. That means J.P. Morgan Chase, Citibank, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, a couple of others, right? Bank of New York Mellon. The top 6 or 7 are unquestionably bankrupt. Now, every Friday, you can pick up an AP wire that says, today the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation shut down the corner bank of Podunk Center in some state. Some little bank that nobody's ever heard of with a few $100 million of deposits or assets. The problem is that every Friday we are reminded that Sheila Baird is guilty of a criminal conspiracy not to shut down the zombie banks, because that's what these things are. The big Wall Street banks are zombie banks, and what I mean by that is this. We were told when the bailout and the TARP went through that if you bailed out Wall Street, that would help Main Street. If you kept the Wall Street banks going, that would mean abundant credit would flow to companies, to industry.
But they haven't been loaning. By design, they've been shutting down Main Street so they can buy it up.
Right. So what we've got is the U.S. taxpayer is now funding zombie banks. What do zombie banks do? Well, you may have noticed, first of all, that the price of gasoline has gone up about $1 per gallon in the last 12 months.
And you predicted that a year ago.
And what is that? That is simply the comeback of Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley, who bid that up to, almost $5 a gallon or so back in the summer of 2008. Then they had to sell it off when they were threatened by bankruptcy, and now they're bidding that up again. So the thanks you get from Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley for saving them is that they are now bidding up the price of gasoline, and they will bid that up as high as they can. So that's one thing they do. Parasitical speculation in the things that you need for your daily life. The second thing, of course, they do is they clip you. They clip you with late fees, deposit fees,
30% credit card rates, right, loan sharking. But Webster, worse than that, they're now lobbying the government to levy all these new taxes on an already broke-back country to then pay them even more money so the government can, quote, pay off debts to central banks. We're now hearing that the big banks, just last week I saw Paulson come out in the news. I saw... who was the other big one? I saw Rubin come out and call for it, and a bunch of others call for higher taxes to pay off debt, much of which is debt accrued by giving them all this money. So they're in there running the government to now rape us financially through taxes.
Exactly, and this is the whole secret of Obama. About 1 year ago right now, Obama met with the editorial board of the Washington Post, and it's something that I talk about in Surviving the Cataclysm. Obama said, well, I ran on hope and change, but now I have to change. I have to abandon those things. Now it's going to be sacrifice and responsibility. Wait a minute. Wall Street has just gotten, 25 trillion, whatever it is, 27 trillion, and now it's time for sacrifice and responsibility for the American people, exhausted, depleted, with our living standard cut already by 2/3. If you look at what Obama wants to do with Social Security and indeed his health care plan, these are bailouts in disguise. These are bailouts to bail out bankrupt insurance companies, all the insurance companies.
Themselves owned by banks. And let me add this. That's why liberals like Dennis Kucinich and even the chairman of the Democratic Party, Dean, have now read the bill. It cuts Medicare and Medicaid by $40+ billion apiece every year. It puts people in jail who can't afford the insurance. It gives liability protection to the insurance companies. I went and looked. The head lobbyist for the insurance companies admits they wrote the bill, but they give them fake left cover in the media saying insurance companies don't want this bill. We're socking it to the rich guy, and the average moron, street-level idiot actually thinks this health care bill is good.
Yes, the Obama health care plan, as you correctly point out, is, first of all, it's about $500 billion cut from Medicare over a period of years. And the idea with that health bill is that you are forced to buy insurance from a private, for-profit, deregulated company which has golden parachutes, which has lobbying budgets, which has 30 or 40% administrative overhead.
Advertising.
And the goal of that is that those companies, in their own way, are just as bankrupt as AIG. They're insurance companies, too. What did they do? They issued derivatives. You can look at Metropolitan Life Insurance Company, but also then look at Cigna, look at United Healthcare, look at all of those, and you'll see that they're all in the same boat. It's just that in this case, instead of doing it through the Federal Reserve, the Treasury, and the FDIC, they want to do it through you, that every person in the United States is required to buy a product from these companies. Now,
and that's why their stock is all shot up, Webster. So Webster, where does it end? Everything the government does, both parties, is a rape of the American people. They're openly involved in crime. If we don't bring them to justice, they're just going to be emboldened for more. Wasn't Copenhagen a big defeat of these people because they openly said fake environmentalism would be their ultimate land grab and their carbon tax and a new layer of derivatives? Aren't they starting to face Waterloo after Waterloo?
Yes, again, I think part of that is international. My analysis of Copenhagen was it was the Russians who leaked those emails about the East Anglia Climate Research Unit, blew the lid off that, and then it was the Chinese and their African allies led by Sudan who actually blocked the thing inside the conference. But now, let's see what the American people can do. I recommend a march on Goldman Sachs. Let's have a march on Wall Street. We've had these Tea Party people marching on Washington. That's fine up to a point. But rather than going for the Cape, let's go for the Matador. And the Matador is in Wall Street. The power decisions in this case are all made by Wall Street, and then that is transmitted to the government.
That's my analogy.
We have Tim Geithner is known to have a cell phone, and he's got his speed dialing set up for 2 or 3 institutions, for Goldman Sachs, for Citibank, and J.P. Morgan Chase. So if he wants to call Jamie Dimon at J.P. Morgan Chase, he wants to call Lloyd Blankfein at Goldman Sachs, and then Pandit the Bandit, Vikram Pandit at Citibank. Those 3, that's the state-sponsored compulsory cartel that features in the new Mussolini fascist corporate state. But again, it's that those companies own the government. They have taken over the U.S. Treasury in the person of Tiny Tim Geithner. Now, I think there's a big groundswell on this. The New York Post headline of today, "Time for Tim to go." This is a neocon newspaper, right? New York Post. There had been already rumors last week when Chris Dodd quit the Senate. The word was already then, when knowing that Geithner was in trouble, that Dodd would replace Geithner. Of course, that's not enough. That would not be, that's just one Wall Street stooge replacing another. If you look at the Wall Street Journal of this morning, which I have in front of me, here's what they're going with. It's a deception strategy. The headline in the Wall Street Journal is, "Banks brace for bonus fury." And they have a picture of Lloyd Blankfein of Goldman Sachs and how the public hates the bonuses, but the Goldman Sachs employees say that the bonuses are not enough and they're not given in cash.
Yeah, that's not what it's about. It's about the crime that was committed.
Yeah, the bonuses, of course, are outrageous, and everybody can see that. But they amount to, $1 billion or $2 billion at the most, whereas we're talking about $700 billion just in the scandal that's at the center of this, $220 billion, as you say, around that, and then it gets up to the $27 trillion.
And then Obama will love that. He will use that to control the wages of people across the United States, but not of the banks.
Yes, so I think what we need, my recommendation is, frankly, class consciousness. In other words, we have the people and we have the bankers. The people are one thing. The people, basically the middle class and people who'd like to be part of it. The bankers are a finance oligarchy. They're globalized elitists. They have no country. They go from Barclays to Deutsche Bank to UBS in Switzerland. They don't care about this stuff. So you've got to understand what essentially is the enemy. The enemy is the financier elite, the banks, in other words. They got to fight the banks.
Yeah, they are the source of everything. They're the source of the land grabbing, the police state, the wars. And we're going to come back in two segments, this segment and one other. Then we have another guest joining us, Wayne Madsen, with some big breaking news, and take phone calls from Dave, John, Joe, Sector, Mark, and others. But Webster, so much is going on. But clearly, people are finally realizing the real economy's falling apart. This song and dance about the economy being better is a fraud. And the people are waking up to the criminality. But we can't just let them scapegoat Geithner. We've got to go after the whole system, have the Congress audit, abolish the Fed, have the Congress under the Constitution in its role, take over the issuance of currency and credit, turn it loose as an engine of production and power for this society.